Today, we embark on a fascinating journey back in time, not to the battlefields or the grand cathedrals, but to the very hearth and table of medieval people. Our topic: what did people truly eat in the Middle Ages? Forget the romanticized portrayals in film and popular culture, which often prioritize aesthetics over historical accuracy, leaving us with a rather skewed image of medieval dining. We are going to delve into the verifiable realities of medieval sustenance, drawing solely from archaeological records, monastic chronicles, household accounts, agricultural treatises, and sumptuary laws to understand the daily bread, or rather, the daily pottage of our ancestors across the entire social spectrum. The first and most crucial point to grasp about medieval cuisine is the absolute, stark chasm between the diets of the rich and the poor. This wasn't merely a difference in quality or variety. It was a fundamental distinction in caloric intake, nutritional balance, and, perhaps most importantly, the very concept of food as a social marker. Imagine a world where your social standing dictated not just your clothes or your dwelling, but the fundamental composition of every meal, every single day, with rigid boundaries that were almost impossible to cross. For the vast majority, the common folk, peasants, serfs, and laborers' life revolved around the relentless pursuit of sufficient calories, primarily from grains, which formed the absolute foundation of their existence and survival. For the medieval peasant, the bedrock of their diet was grain. These weren't your artisanal, heritage grain varieties found in today's gourmet shops. We're talking about hardy, nutrient-dense varieties like barley, rye, and oats, predominantly. Wheat, the most prized of grains due to its finer flour and suitability for leavened bread, was largely reserved for the wealthier classes, though poorer folk might occasionally consume it, especially in regions where wheat was the dominant crop. These coarser grains were milled, often at the local lord's mill, into a rough, dark flour that formed the basis of their daily bread. This bread was dense, sometimes unleavened, and consumed in truly prodigious quantities, often several pounds a day, representing the vast majority of their caloric intake. It served not just as food, providing essential carbohydrates for arduous labor, but also as a multi-purpose tool. A thick slice of stale bread, known as a trencher, would often serve as a functional plate upon which other foods were placed. Once the meal was consumed, this trencher, now soaked in juices and sauces, would either be eaten by the diner, if they were particularly hungry or frugal, or more commonly, given to the poor as an act of charity or to animals. This was an ingenious, early form of waste reduction born directly out of sheer necessity and economic imperative. Beyond bread, the peasant's diet heavily featured pottage. Think of this as the original slow cooker meal, a ubiquitous survival stew that was adaptable to whatever ingredients were at hand. A thick, savory porridge or stew made from whatever was available and seasonal. It contained grains like oats, barley, or millet, often cooked with water or weak ale, and bulked out with an array of seasonal vegetables. Cabbage, onions, leeks, carrots, parsnips, and turnips were common, grown in small garden plots or gathered from the wild. Legumes such as peas, beans, and lentils were absolutely vital sources of protein, especially crucial given the extreme scarcity of meat for the common person. Wild herbs, both cultivated and foraged from forests and fields, were used extensively for flavor and often for their perceived medicinal properties. This pottage was typically cooked in a single, large pot suspended over the communal fire, simmering for hours, and was frequently the main meal of the day, consumed morning, noon, and night, sometimes even providing multiple meals from a single, continuously replenished preparation. Meat was a rare and precious commodity for the common people. It might be consumed only a few times a year, perhaps on a major feast day, a celebratory occasion, or if they were lucky enough to keep a few chickens or a pig. Any animal products that were obtained would be consumed in their entirety, offal, such as liver, kidneys, and heart, blood, used in puddings or as a thickener, and bones, for rich broths and stocks, were all utilized for their maximum nutritional and economic value. Eggs, when available, were a valuable protein source. Fish, especially freshwater varieties from local rivers and ponds, supplemented their diet, particularly on the numerous days when the church forbade the consumption of meat. Foraging also played a crucial role in supplementing calories and nutrients, providing nuts, berries, mushrooms, and wild greens to diversify and bolster cultivated foods, highlighting the intimate relationship between peasants and their local environment. Life for the peasant was a constant, arduous negotiation with the land and the seasons, and their diet directly reflected this absolute dependency on local agricultural output and the unpredictable whims of nature. Now, let us turn our attention to the other end of the social spectrum, the nobility and wealthy elite. Their diet, in stark contrast to the common folk, was characterized by an almost unimaginable abundance and variety, especially of meat. Venison from their exclusive hunting preserves, wild boar, rabbit, hare, and an astonishing array of birds, swan, peacock, heron, crane, partridge, quail, and various smaller game birds, regularly graced their tables. These were not just meals. They were elaborate, theatrical displays of wealth, power, and mastery over the natural world, often presented with great pomp and ceremony in grand halls. Imagine today a billionaire hosting a dinner party where every single dish is an exotic, rare game animal, meticulously presented with its feathers reattached, or designed to burst forth with live entertainment from within a pie. That was the medieval equivalent, magnified by the sheer scale and frequency of their feasts. Beef, pork, and lamb were also consumed in vast quantities, often roasted whole on spits over roaring fires, stewed into rich, complex sauces laden with spices, or baked into colossal pies, some of which were incredibly dramatic, featuring live birds escaping from the crust or other elaborate conceits designed to astound and entertain guests and affirm the host's status. For the nobility, dining was a grand performance, a fundamental expression of their status and influence within the feudal hierarchy and beyond. Spices, imported from the exotic East, were another potent symbol of their elevated position. Black pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, ginger, and the highly prized saffron, these were astronomically expensive commodities, valued almost as highly as gold due to the perilous and lengthy trade routes, primarily the Silk Road, and the massive labor involved in their cultivation and transport. They were used not only to flavor food, often in combinations that seem unusual to modern palates, but also to preserve it, to mask the taste of ingredients that were less than fresh, and, crucially, to show off. A medieval lord who could afford to douse his dishes in vibrant saffron for color and pungent ginger for taste was broadcasting his immense wealth, his global connections, and his refined taste. Cookery books, such as the Fermi of Curry, from the court of Richard II, or La Viandière, attributed to Taillevent, a French royal chef, began to emerge among the elite, showcasing sophisticated recipes and elaborate presentation techniques. Compare that to today, where a vast array of spices are commonplace and affordable for nearly everyone. In the Middle Ages, they were an exclusive luxury accessible only to the elite, marking them distinctly from the common populace. The medieval Christian Church exerted a profound and pervasive influence over diet, shaping what and when people ate throughout the year with unyielding authority. The medieval calendar was a gastronomic roller coaster of mandatory fasting and prescribed feasting. Imagine a year where over 150 days were designated as fast days, requiring abstinence from meat, and often from dairy and eggs, depending on the strictness of the fast and the specific religious observance. Fridays, Saturdays, and Wednesdays were commonly observed as fast days, along with the entire period of Lent leading up to Easter, Advent, and numerous saints' days. Lent, of course, was the most stringent, a 40-day period of near-vegan austerity where only fish, vegetables, and grains were permitted, even at the most opulent noble tables. During these times, fish, both freshwater and saltwater varieties, became an essential protein source. Salted and dried cod, herring, and stockfish were crucial for inland regions far from the sea, representing a monumental trade network dedicated to meeting this pervasive religious demand across Europe. These dietary restrictions were not mere suggestions. They were deeply ingrained religious obligations, enforced by both spiritual belief and social custom, with severe social and even legal penalties for non-compliance. Given the absence of modern refrigeration, food preservation was not merely a convenience. It was a constant, ingenious, and life-sustaining challenge that dictated much of the medieval diet, especially through the harsh winters and periods of scarcity between harvests. Salting, smoking, drying, and pickling were the fundamental techniques employed. Meat and fish were heavily salted to prevent spoilage, which meant they often needed extensive soaking in water for hours or even days before cooking to reduce the overwhelming sodium content. Vegetables and fruits were preserved by drying: apples, pears, pickling in vinegar or brine, cabbage for sauerkraut, cucumbers, or storing in cool, dark root cellars and underground pits. Honey was the primary sweetener, widely used for both flavoring and preservation, as cane sugar was still a rare and incredibly costly import from distant lands, a luxury akin to modern-day exotic superfoods. Think of medieval kitchens and larders as bustling, incredibly resourceful enterprises dedicated not just to daily cooking, but to ensuring that every morsel of food lasted through lean seasons, unpredictable harvests, and long journeys, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of scarcity. What about drinks? Water, in many medieval settlements, especially those with higher population densities, was often unsafe to drink due to contamination from human and animal waste and rudimentary sanitation systems. As a result, people primarily drank ale and beer. Think of medieval beer less as an intoxicating party drink and more as a daily necessity, a safer and more nutritious alternative to raw water. It was typically brewed with a very low alcohol content, often less than 1% for common consumption, and was consumed even by children as a staple beverage, a form of liquid bread, providing essential calories and hydration without the risks of contaminated water. Wine was also popular, especially in wine-producing regions like France, Italy, and parts of Germany, and for the wealthier classes who could afford imported or higher-quality local varieties. Mead, a fermented honey drink, was also common, particularly in Northern Europe where honey was more readily available than grapes. The choices in beverages were as dictated by geography, climate, and social class as the food itself, making hydration itself a carefully considered part of daily life and not a simple matter of turning on a tap. Dining etiquette, while perhaps less refined by modern standards of individual plates and personal cutlery, was still important and highly structured, especially among the upper classes. Forks, as we know them, were only beginning to appear in Italy by the late Middle Ages, mainly as a novelty for eating specific foods like pasta, and were not widely adopted across Europe until much later centuries. People ate primarily with their hands, using knives to cut meat from communal joints and spoons for pottage and stews. Bowls and cups were often shared among several diners, symbolizing communal bonds. Communal dining was the norm, even among the nobility, fostering a sense of shared experience, albeit with clear hierarchical seating arrangements, with the most important individuals seated at the high table and those of lower status further down the hall. Imagine a modern family dinner where everyone shares a single large bowl of stew and uses their hands. It was a very different, more tactile, and less individualistic experience. Food preparation also involved significant, constant labor. Grinding grain, fetching water and firewood, tending fires, butchering animals, and endless chopping and stirring, all without modern appliances or conveniences. The medieval diet was also heavily influenced by regionality and the specific agricultural conditions of the area. Coastal communities consumed more fish and seafood, while inland regions relied more on game and domesticated animals. Forested areas allowed for extensive pig rearing. Pigs could forage on acorns and hunting, whereas rich arable land focused primarily on grains. The diet also saw gradual changes over the roughly 1,000-year period we call the Middle Ages. New crops, improved agricultural techniques, like the heavy plow or three-field system, and evolving trade routes subtly altered what was available and how it was prepared. For example, by the later Middle Ages, particularly after the Black Death reshaped demographics and labor availability, a slightly greater emphasis on animal husbandry became possible in some regions, leading to increased meat consumption even for some commoners, and more sophisticated cookery books began to emerge among the elite, reflecting a growing culinary artistry and refinement. This dynamic interplay of climate, technology, social structure, and religion created a richly complex food landscape. The medieval diet, by and large, was profoundly shaped by geography, season, social class, and religion. It was a diet of necessity and often scarcity for the many, a constant struggle against famine and disease, and a diet of opulent excess and theatrical display for the few. It was remarkably adaptable and incredibly resourceful, utilizing every part of an animal and every scrap of a plant out of a deep-seated economic and survival imperative. While it certainly lacked the global culinary diversity, scientific nutritional understanding, and instant convenience we enjoy today, it was robust, often remarkably healthy by the standards of the time, providing a good range of nutrients when supplies were consistent and harvests were bountiful. It was deeply intertwined with the social, economic, and religious fabric of medieval society, a direct reflection of daily life and its inherent challenges. It offers us a powerful reminder of how profoundly our access to food has changed, transforming from a constant struggle for survival and status into a matter of unparalleled convenience and abundant choice for so many of us in the modern world. I hope this journey into the medieval larder has offered you a fresh and accurate perspective on a fascinating period. If you've enjoyed this exploration of history and found it enlightening, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel for more verifiable insights into the past. Your support helps us continue to bring these crucial stories to life.